The Ontario Legislature resumes today for the first time since the re-election of Premier Doug Ford.
Politicians heading back to Queen's Park amid a healthcare staffing crisis and skyrocketing inflation. Members returning today to vote for a new speaker. Tomorrow's throne speech will then outline the government's new agenda and budget, which is expected to be largely unchanged from when it was introduced but never passed in the spring before the election. Now, Premier Ford is expected to acknowledge the healthcare and economic pressures. It's not clear at this point, though, if any new measures will be added to address them.
So MPPs are back at Queen's Park today for the first time since Doug Ford led the Progressive Conservatives to their second majority win in the June election, and a bigger win, in fact. For more on what we can expect during this session, we're joined now by John Capobianco, Conservative strategist and Senior Vice President and Senior Partner at Fleishman Hillard Highroad. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. So what can we expect today and tomorrow? It's going to be busy at Queen's Park.
Well, it is going to be busy. And of course, as you mentioned, this is a special session because normally, of course, summer is a break time for a lot of politicians, both federally and provincially, quite frankly, because a lot of their legislatures are recessed to allow for MPs and MPPs to go back to their ridings and do what we call the barbecue circuit. But this is a special one, as the Premier announced after the election that he wanted to have a special sitting in order to pass the budget. So what we're going to be seeing today is an election of a speaker, and there's a couple of them running. But and of course, once that happens, then the official beginning of the Parliament will begin with a throne speech tomorrow. And then I suspect the large part of this session is going to be focused on the budget that the Premier brought forward and delivered just before the election. I think it was about April 28th when he presented the budget. So there'll be some tweaks to it, but I suspect a large part of the session will be getting that passed.
You know, John, certainly a lot has sort of shifted and changed in terms of the economy, you know, just even in the last couple of months based on, you know, where interest rates have gone. Gas prices have kind of been yo-yoing all over the place. That's putting a real, you know, cramp in people's, you know, wallets and pocketbooks, that sort of thing. So when you talk about tweaks, et cetera, how much do you think that the province is going to need to focus on that? Because so much of the Doug Ford pitch and appeal is really to sort of pocketbook issues, to sort of trying to help people, you know, get ahead, get by, get better, that sort of thing. How do you think that, because the budget, you know, which came in the spring, really would appear to be, in some cases, not really transferable or sort of timely for now?
Well, I would probably argue that it is. I think that what they've done is when they delivered the budget in April, they focused on a number of key issues that invariably became the election campaign. If you recall, Nick, the campaign was sort of based on the theme of getting it done or get it done. And it was based on 5 things, which was, one is rebuilding the economy, infrastructure and building roads, working for workers, and basically keeping costs down for a lot of residents, which of course is still relevant now. And one of the things that the Premier did was cut gas taxes. And as we're seeing, because before or during the election campaign, it was upwards of north of $2, and now we're down to about $1.60, $1.70, depending on where you are. So that was one thing. You know, the license plate sticker money back. They realized early on that inflation and cost of living were going through the roof, and the Premier did what he could to try to do his part in getting some of those costs down, namely, of course, the gas tax and some of the other issues. So that'll be focused on the budget. There'll be a lot of tweaks with respect to the increase in the Ontario Disability Support Fund, which he promised. And I would imagine there might be some funding for some of those communities that were affected by the storm that happened a few weeks ago. And some cities and some areas were quite leveled by that. So there might be some tweaking or some extra funding for that.
And let's focus on some other issues as well that a lot of people will be looking at. Healthcare staffing crisis, but also negotiating new contracts with teachers. And of course, we know that there's going to be a protest today by the Ontario Federation Labour. So a lot of unrest, a lot of unhappy groups here as this new session gets underway today. Well, how do you think the government is going to approach this?
Well, I think they're going to reiterate and announce some of the funding that they've already provided in healthcare and some of the nurses that they've and public health workers that they've brought on since the pandemic. And I think they'll likely be focusing on that in some cases. Long-term care and the amount of money, you know, unprecedented billions that they've been spending and providing for long-term care to shore that up. As you mentioned, there's going to be there's teacher negotiations, and of course, nobody wants the students to be affected by that come September when school starts. So there might be some discussions there. And then the other issue I think that has been in the media and talked about is this whole issue around strong mayors, right? The concept of providing some of the big city mayors, I think namely Toronto and Ottawa, with some extra powers. That's something that was mentioned in the media. And even the Premier and the Minister of Municipal Affairs both said that it's something that they're looking at doing, and one that I think would probably benefit Toronto for sure in some cases. But those are all issues that I think might be on the mix within the next 5 weeks of sitting.
Yeah, absolutely. lots of business to get to. John Capobianco, thanks for sort of setting the table for us this morning here on CP24 Breakfast. Have a good one.
Thank you so much.